It's Yud Shevat today. This is the Yortzeit of the sixth Lubavitcher Rebbe, Rabbi Yosef Yitzchok ben Reb Shalom Dov Ber, Schusi Yogan Aleinu, passed away in the beginning of January 1950, which was Yud Shevat, about 10 to 8 or so in the morning. And we celebrate his life. And we also celebrate the continuation of his life through his son-in-law, the Rebbe, who became the next leader of Lubavitch at the moment that his father-in-law passed away, although outwardly it was a year later in 1951, January of 1951, that he formally accepted the leadership of Chabad. So I want to begin this a short farbrengen. If you care to, tonight I'll be farbrengen in the Lakewood area for much longer, and we'll have it hopefully on YouTube, so you'll be able to hear more about different things. But just to begin with a maisa, you know, they say, the more you relate the story of Tzias Mitzrayim, Hareza Meshubach, the more praiseworthy you are. So there's a vart, Kol Hamarbe L'Saper. You have to continue telling stories. Sipurim, in particularly, have a way to get to people in a way much more than, studying and learning, intellectualizing. There's something very, very significant and powerful about Mises. So I just heard this yesterday from the son to who this happened, and it's kind of hot off the press. A Maisa of the Frierdiker Rebbe. It was 1945, right here in Brooklyn, right here in Borough Park, because the person lived in Borough Park, both of them. One was a Yid by the name of Rabbi Avram Weingarten. He was my third grade Rebbe in Yeshiva, Lubavitch Yeshiva, back in 1969. He was from Vienna, and he somehow came to learn in Lubavitch Yeshiva, I believe in 1941, after it opened in 1940 in 770, and he came to be one of the Talmidim. The other one was someone that some of you know and heard and maybe even met, Rebbe Zalman Schechter. Zalman Schechter was like a best friend to Avram Weingarten, although Zalman was born in Poland, but he grew up part of his youth. I think he says at about 1 to 1.5, his parents moved to Vienna. So he knew Weingarten, I don't know, from Vienna, and then later again they were together in Marseille, Escape, I think. Whatever, they knew each other well. But Kitzur, so they actually lived here in Borough Park, and they both were in the yeshiva, and that's where they got their chinuch and became Lubavitchers. That's where basically, Zalman had already met the previous Rebbe in Belgium, the previous Rebbe's Chassidim in Belgium, and he tells the story about that. But nevertheless, when you go into the yeshiva and you're there for 3-4 years and you're immersed in its culture and it's the learning chassidus and farbrengen with older chassidim yet talmidim who were students of the Rebbe Rashav, it's a whole different experience. So Bekitzer, they were both called to the draft. At that time the United States had a very serious draft, and unless you were a yeshiva bacher actively learning in yeshiva, you didn't get an exemption from the army. So they were called to downtown Brooklyn, and they were supposed to go on a Thursday. And somehow they met our Rebbe, who was called at the time the Ramash, for an acronym for his name, Reb Mem Shin Schneerson. So and they told him, they knew him from 770, and they told him that they have to go to the draft board and to be checked, and if they're healthy, they're going to be enlisted in the army. So the Rebbe says to them, the Ramash says to them, come see the previous Rebbe the night before for a bracha, Wednesday night, because they were scheduled to go Thursday morning. They go up to the apartment, which is, as Moshe, I took Moshe, I didn't go up, but above There's the ground floor with the big base medrash today, 770. Then there's when you walk in, you go up the steps. That's like the second floor. And then the third floor is where the previous Rebbe lived. And the fourth floor is where his other son-in-law, the Rashag, lived and had his offices for the yeshiva. Anyway, so they go upstairs and they knock on the door. And it was Wednesday night. It wasn't a night of Yechidus. And it happens to be that who was there? The previous Rebbe's daughter, Rebbe Chaim Mushka, the Rebbe's wife. And she says to them, like, what are you doing here? It's like, there's no Yechidus tonight. You can't. It's closed. So they say, your husband told us to come. So she says, 1 minute. And she goes in and she talks to, obviously, to the Rebbe. And she says, yeah, he told you to come in. You're right. Come in. And he says to them, go into for a bracha to the previous Rebbe, to my father-in-law. So Avram says to Zalman, he says, you're a Kohen. Zalman was a Kohen. So he says a Kohen has, precedence, and go first. So he goes in, and the Rebbe gives him a bracha. Comes out, and Weingarten goes in. Gives him a bracha, gives him brachas, and then at the end, he says to Weingarten, and I heard this last night from his oldest son, who's a shliach in Grand Rapids, Michigan, Rabbi Yosef Yitzchak Weingarten. So he told me this story last night, so that's why it's fresh. So he says, Frike Rebbe looks at him, and he says to him, in Zeira Eigen, in their eyes, meaning the board, the people that are checking you out tomorrow, sollst du nicht sein gesund, something like that. You shouldn't be well. Because if you're not well, you're not qualified to be in the army. So in their eyes, you shouldn't be well. Those are the last words that he said to him. And then if you ever saw a picture of the Rebbe, he had a very beautiful, broad smile, a very, very, big smile, and he gave that big, broad smile to him, and Weingarten left. Okay. The next day, they come to the place, and they see a line outside, all these people, including from people, and everyone is waiting to be seen. This is no joke. You had to go to be checked if you're qualified, if you're healthy enough. It comes Weingarten's turn, and he sees someone on the side, which he found out later was a professor or a psychologist. He told the son the name, but he forgot yesterday, so I don't know the name. And he says to him, you're a yeshiva bacher, right? He says, yeah, I'm a yeshiva bacher. So he says, what are you learning? So he tells him, Ksubas, Gittin, whatever, and he starts talking to him a little bit and learning. And he sees he knows, right? Because his job was there, on one hand, to see who was authentic and who was a draft dodger, right? Because there were many yeshiva bachrim who were using the excuse, but they were in college, or they were here or there, and they weren't really yeshiva bachrim. So he talks to him and learning, but that's not enough. Then he says to him, he takes the paper, and he looks up and he says, let me ask you, do you go to movies? So he says, movies? I don't go to movies. I'm a yeshiva. I don't go to movies. Movies in those days was a big thing. I know today you get it on your phone. But in those days, going to a movie theater was a mashahud, a chaticha. It was something important. He says, let me ask you, do you read comic books? I don't know why comic books. I'm just repeating what I heard. He says, comic books? I'm learning Gemara and Chassidus and Farbrengen and recording things that I hear. We don't read comic books. And then he asks him something else. Oh, yeah, do you have girlfriends? A girlfriend? He says, girlfriend? A yeshiva bacher in 770 should have a girlfriend? What, are you out of your mind? So he writes down, not normal. He writes down, this bacher, this Weingarten is not normal. Boom, he's exempt. He doesn't have to go. Now Weingarten, he came with Schechter, so he's waiting for Schechter. He turns around, he doesn't see Schechter. He doesn't see him. He looks here, there, and they say, hey, Weingarten, out. We have 100 people waiting in line. There's no place for you here. We're checking people. It's a busy place here. You have to leave. He has to leave. Schechter's not around. He leaves. He comes back to 770, and the Rosh Hashiva Rebbe Mentlik sees him, and he knew that Schechter and him went to the board. He says, what happened. He tells him, and he was very happy. And then he says, and where's Zalman? Where's Zalman? So he says, I don't know where Zalman is. I was looking for him. He disappeared. Okay. Hours later, into the night, Zalman shows back up in 770. And they ask him, where'd you get lost? It's like the Rebbe once says to Zalman in 1963 at a Fabrengen, you went for a retreat? You went for a meditation? Where were you? Anyway, so Zalman says, I'll tell you what happened. It was my turn. They came to check me. I had my tzitzis. They tell me this robe. Completely, they have to check everything, I said, I'm not taking off my tzitzis. They said, well, how are we going to do an x-ray on you? So he says, simple. And he threw his tzitzis over his shoulder, so the chest is all bare. What's the problem? They said, good, fine. And they took the x-ray, and the x-ray came out, and they saw a line on his lungs. Somehow, the Chachamim, these wise doctors or medics, whoever did it, when they took the x-ray, somehow the tzitza was x-rayed as well. I don't know how, but that's what happened. Oh, they said, ooh, we have to check you out. Wait a minute. So he had to go through the whole process. In other words, Avram Weingarten was exempt by this psychiatrist, and he said, you're not normal because you don't date girls and you don't read comics and you don't go to the movies. Out. But Zalman didn't have that look. Zalman was normal. But the problem was he has a medical issue, so they had to check him. So he went to doctor, and that's why it took time. That's why he wasn't around, and that's why he came late. By the way, this doctor, this psychiatrist, psychologist, or professor, whoever he was there because he heard that they're making a lot of difficulties for yeshiva bachurim. It was very, very difficult. In other words, even real yeshiva bachurim, they didn't let him go. They pressured them, and they because although the law was the law, but there was draft dodging, and so he knew this. So he somehow worked for them. So he positioned himself right there at the beginning before you went to the other doctors, so that he could save and help real yeshiva bachurim. Understand? That was his idea. His idea was, and because he's a professional psychiatrist, they trusted him, and he worked for them. So his intent was good, not bad. That's a story that I heard. So what did the Frierdiker Rebbe say? The Frierdiker Rebbe said, in their eyes, you should be not gesund. So both for Zalman in his way, and in other words, with Weingarten, he's not gesund, he's not well, he's meshuggah, he's not a normal guy in America. And Zalman has something on his lung from the tzitza. So the Frierdiker Rebbe's bracha, the night before, Wednesday night, this is the result. So Schusi Yogan Aleinu, if I bring, and tell a Maisa from the Frierdiker Rebbe. And one more thing. The Frierdiker Rebbe passed away, as I told you, Shabbos morning, about 10 to 8 o'clock in the morning. That night was supposed to be Weingarten's vort, his engagement in Washington Heights. And, everyone knows that it was a very difficult Shabbos, and the Motzei Shabbos, and what should he do? So he went to the Ramash, again, the Rebbe. And the Rebbe, and he tells him, he said, he was going to, no, I'm sorry. He lived in Borough Park. Let me take Motzei Shabbos. He's getting dressed for his own engagement party, getting ready to go to Washington Heights, and he finds out that the Frierdiker Rebbe passed away in the morning. He wasn't in Crown Heights that Shabbos. He was in Borough Park, here. And what does he do now? So he doesn't get dressed up spiffy. He decides, he was mamash a makusher to the Frierdiker Rebbe, connected. I'm canceling the engagement party. My Rebbe just passed away this Shabbos. He goes to 770. He comes in, Motzei Shabbos, because everyone came and was, crying, saying Tillim, the whole thing. And he meets the Rebbe. And he tells the Rebbe, so the Rebbe says to him, Avram, weren't you supposed to be now in your engagement? He knew, in other words, it was arranged right before. And the Rebbe knew that tonight was supposed to be Avram Weingarten's engagement in Washington Heights. What are you doing here? So he tells the Rebbe, what do you mean what I'm doing here? You know what happened today? What am I doing here? I should make an engagement party with the Rebbe passed away, the Frierdiker Rebbe. So the Rebbe took him to Reb Shmuel Levittin, who had a room at the end of the corridor of the level of the 770. And Reb Shmuel was considered like the Rav, the in-house rabbi, you know. And the Rebbe tells Reb Shmuel, this is the situation, and the Rebbe says to Reb Shmuel, and wanted to know if he would agree as the Rav, that since Weingarten already was keveya, that there should be an engagement, in other words, people are coming and they're expecting an engagement, he should take 2-3 guys, his friends from 770, go now to the engagement, do the ceremony, and come back. Come back. And Reb Shmuel said, of course, yes, it's a good idea, and that's what happened. And that happened 1950, not 51. So Weingarten's son, Yossi, says to me, you see, the Rebbe already accepted the leadership of Chabad already the Motzei Shabbos after his father-in-law passes away, giving this instruction to Weingarten, with the Rav agreeing and Weingarten following and everything else. So it's a day today which celebrates two simultaneous things. I must say, when I was growing up in the 70s, we really only celebrated the Hilula, the Histalkos, the Yortzeit. There wasn't really an emphasis on the Rebbe taking over. For whatever reason, I guess because the older crowd was still around and, that wasn't their focus. So, it's interesting. Last night, Rabbi Krinsky, they had a Zoom. And Rabbi Krinsky spoke, and he said, I don't know if he should have said it or did not, but he said, I have a hard time saying Good Yom Tov today. Because a lot of Lubavitch Chassidim say Good Yom Tov because the Rebbe became a Rebbe today, our Rebbe. So Rabbi Krinsky said, he says, I didn't grow up that way. I understand it, but I just didn't grow up that way. So I too, didn't grow up really in the 70s with that approach. I didn't see Chassidim take that approach. In fact, I saw the Rebbe, when they davened, as the years went on and the younger generation was getting, more involved and active and really to be the main people, main players, as they say. So they wanted to get out of saying Tachnun today. So if you're celebrating the Rebbe's leadership and you're happy about it, you can. But if it's a yahrzeit in Chabad, we say Tachnun on the yahrzeit of the Alter Rebbe and the Rashab. And I saw myself, the Rebbe did not. They started to say Yiskadol Yizkadosh right after Shemoneh Esrei. No. Rabbi Groner went over and the Rebbe looked around like, why aren't we saying Tachnun? And Rabbi Groner would make sure to have a chassan nearby. He pointed to the chassan that we have a chassan. So a chassan exempts you from saying Tachnun. During the Shivas Miyamishta, someone will get married. But that was the way it was then. The Kudah that the Rebbe spoke about in the first Maimer that he said tonight, Yud Shevat 1951, was about the Avas Yisrael of all of the Rebbes. So I'll tell you another story that not only was this talk, the Rebbe mentioned how much love Avas Yisrael, the Frierdiker Rebbe, had for every single Yid, and he showed that similarity in the other 6 Lubavitcher Rebbes. And it's in the Maimer, the first Maimer, Tafshi Yudal of Bosel Gani. But,
yeah.
Go ahead.
That's the one we did a couple of years ago, right?
Yes.
Achron, Chaviv.
I don't remember that Lashon, Achron, Chaviv.
Hashem loves the Achron, that's, okay.
Oh, Kol HaShvi and Chavivim, he's a Shvi to the Rishon, but the Shvi, that might. Yeah. Anyway, so there was a Yid named Reb Moshe Groner. He was a brother of Label Groner, a younger brother. He was the youngest of the Groner brothers. That Yud Shevat in 1951 was like today, on a Wednesday. So what I'm telling you now happened last night, 1951. 770 is dark, no one's around, except Moshe Groner. And he sat in the beis medrash, in the upstairs beis medrash, the little, what we call the little zal. And one wall has two doors which open up to the Merkez office. In those days, I think it was open even. Anyway, he hears the phone ring, and it's ringing. Now, he wasn't a secretary. His brother was, Label, and Rabbi Chadakov, so it wasn't his. But no one's around, and the phone is ringing and ringing. He picks up the phone finally, and it's the Rebbe on the phone from his house. He lived then on New York Avenue and President Street in the building, I think the third or fourth floor. Anyway, in an apartment, he says, is Rabbi Groner around, your brother? He says, no. Is Rabbi Chadakov around? No. Is this one around? No, no one's around. He says, I'm here by myself. He says, maybe you could do me a favor. Moshe, maybe you could do me a favor. Could you come over to my house? I'll tell you. He says, sure. He comes over, and he tells him like this, that there's someone that's not feeling well, and they need a doctor. And the Rebbe says, and I called this doctor that I know, and the doctor said, if you're not feeling, go to the hospital. It said, yeah, doctor's good. Like, what and the Rebbe said, it's difficult for him to go to the hospital. Can you do me a favor? Come. And he could see that he wasn't really willing to do that. He wasn't, he's at home. So the Rebbe said to him, if you come, I'll come. And he knew that this up-and-coming Rebbe over here is a special Yid. So when he heard that, he says, okay, if you come, I'm coming. So the Rebbe says to Moshe Groner, I'm very busy, I'm in the middle of something now, and I need some help because I have to go away, and it'll be a while before I return. He gave him a list of citations of Mara Mekaymois, and he said, in his room, the Rebbe had a big library, he says, do me a favor, find all these references in these Svarim and keep them on my desk. So when I come back, I won't have to go look for them because time is of the essence, but, you put a napkin in each place and you keep the place, and I'll be able to open up the sefer and right away go to the citation. He says, sure. 2-3 hours went by and Groner did this, and the Rebbe came back 2-3 hours later because he was helping a Yid with an inyan, a medical issue, and the doctor would have not come if he wouldn't go as well. This was Tuesday night, 1951. The next night, the Rebbe made the Farbrengen, Yud Shevat, and he said a Maimer, and guess what? All those references he mentioned in the Maimer, and he wanted to look him up, and so that he could say it properly, etc. And he spoke about the theme of the Maimer I told you, is Avas Yisrael. So he himself, without saying it in the Maimer, of course, I have Avas Yisrael, he left his comfort zone the night before when he said I didn't have time. I think he was up all night preparing the Maimer. And, and he was very busy, but a Yid needed attention and help. So he left the Maimer, he asked Groner to help him. Luckily, Groner was there. I'm sure the Rebbe would have gone even if Groner wasn't there. But this is the story, and it's Groner repeated it to us, and it happened, and it's very important because it's not just talk. They're good speakers and talkers, and Rebbe was Mekayim, the Avas Yisrael that his 6 predecessors did, and that he said in the Maimah, this was one of the signs of a Lubavitcher Rebbe, that he dedicates himself to every single Yid. The Rebbe did that himself, and that was the night before the next night when he said the Maimer, and he basically accepted. Now, what happened at the time? A chassid by the name of Rabbi Alexander Nemtsov. I have him born in 1870, but somewhere he was the oldest chassid, I believe, at the time. And he got up in the beginning of the Farbrengen and he said to the Rebbe, the siches are wonderful. the talks. But a Rebbe in Chabad says a Maimer Chassidus. We want to hear from you a Maimer Chassidus. No, but he was so much older, and he had the chutzpah to say it, and he said it well. And so the Rebbe instructed they sing the previous Rebbe's song, I think the Beinani. Ay, 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 ay. Ay, 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 ay. Ay, 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 ay. That niggin. There's more, but... And then he started to say like this. The Rebbe says, the Rebbe, about the previous Rebbe, the Rebbe says on the Posik, and then he started to say, Bo siligani achoisi kalo. So he started off with a sicha tone, and then he went into a mimer tone. Oh, Chassidim were ecstatic. They had to listen at that time, but they started to say L'chaim. And then he made, I think, 2 or 3 pauses in the mimer. He told them to sing the gunim, and he explained more things. But that was the way. Oh, and then after he finished the mimer, Nemtsov got up again, and he said, Baruch Ato Hashem, I think B'Shem U'Malchus, with the Hashem's name, Shechiyonu v'Kimonu v'Giyonu l'Zman Hazeh, that we have a Rebbe. That's the history of how there's a lot more, but the night of Yud Shevat, 1951, what took place in 770, so many years ago, this is what took, and then afterward, one more thing, and in the presence of the Rebbe, Nemtsov jumped up on a table together with Rabbi Elia Simpson, who was the secretary, the Frierdiker Rebbe, the Rebbe at the time, and they started to dance. They were so besimcha. And then the Rebbe left the Fabrengen, and they continued dancing, and the Rebbe Yoel saw them dance. He was so, because they were seniors. Simpson was born, I think, in 1889. He was born in 1870, and they're dancing like young Bacharim, because they were so happy. They were so happy. And then a few weeks later, the Rebbe called over Rebbe Yoel, and he said, I'd like to write up the mimer. So Rebbe Yoel said that the first mimer, the first part, he was shikker. Everyone was, they were saying a lot of L'chaim that he doesn't remember. And they were so happy. He was saying L'chaim, and Ganesh. Although they heard the mimer before, they didn't do it during the mimer. But, he said, so the Rebbe said, what about the second part? So he said he didn't know. So the Rebbe said to him, you're shikker now? You're shikker now? Now you're not shikker, so now, sit down, work that. And he did. Rabbi Yoel wanted the Rebbe should write the mimer, because by the other 6 Rabbeim, except the Alter Rebbe, they wrote their own Maimorim, right? It's the Maimorim that they themselves wrote. So Rabbi Yoel wanted, like all other Chassidim, that the mimer, he should write it. What do you mean, I'm going to write up the mimer? It's your mimer. You write it up, and the Kedusha comes from you, from the Tzaddik. And the Rebbe said to him, you write it up, and I will edit it and fix it. And that's the way it went. He didn't agree to write it up in full. But Rabbi Yoel was trying, from this way, that way, to kind of, come on. We made a Shechiyonu. You said a mimer, now put it in writing like a regular Lubavitcher Rebbe, But the Rebbe answered once, he said that, would you rather I do that or save Yidden? Yidden come to me and write to me, and there's just no time for everything. Which is more important? Writing my Maimorim? Or answering a Yid who needs a Neitza for Parnasa, or for a Bracha for Refuah, or for a Shidduch? So, Chevre, it's a very special day today. Yes, Hillel.
I just wondered if now or another time you could expand on what you meant by the tune, the Sicha tune and the Mimer tune.
Well, briefly, a Sicha means like I'm talking to you, a Sicha, a conversation. The Maimer tune, 1 second, a Maimer tune, the Rebbe's Maimer tune was, Bos legani achoisi kalo isem medrish b'mkoimo legan inksiv kan el legan. There's a sing song and a tune. It's not a regular conversation.
That was a Masorah, like the Rebbe's handed down that kind of way, that tune or that cadence.
You know, I asked that question. It seems like the Rashab had a different. I have to re-ask that, but it could be it wasn't the Rashab's tune when he said a mimer. It might be the previous Rebbe, or it might be the Rebbe's original. I have to ask. But regardless, they yeah. In other words, like this. Let me say it this way: they didn't say a mimer the way you would give a drasha in a shul, right? There was a Yid in Tel Aviv, a big Rav, Reb Sheil Ber Zislin, in the 30s, 40s, 50s. And my father heard him saying a mimer. He stood up at Shalosh Shudas, and he said, the Gemara says so-and-so. He said it like a drasha, but it was a mimer chassidus. You know, so that's kind of a conversation tune, a drasha tune for a mimer. We're talking about this particular sing-song that the Rebbe chose. Yes, what do you want to say?
When you were trained to memorize Mamarim, like I remember the one that you said once that was set in Beit Shemesh.
Yeah.
There was a member that had a reference to Beit Shemesh. Was that tune?
I can't say I was trained that way, but I did it because I heard the Rebbe saying my Morim. So as his chassid, I just grew up in that culture. Okay. But it's interesting you ask me that, because a good friend of mine who has a better memory and he knows a lot more my Morim by heart. So he heard me say sometimes my Morim is 770 between Shalosh Shudas, right, Shabbos, and he said to me once, Chaim, he says, "Why did you say it with the exact tune of the Rebbe?" And I said to him, look, I'm not, here a robot. I'm saying it the way I hear it. I'm not saying I'm saying it with a tune. But he says, yeah, but it's not exactly like this. I said, okay. So, yes, there are Hasidim who emulate the tune to the dot. I guess I'm not one of them. I try. I say it the way I heard it, which is the general tune.
That's not specifically wasn't part of the training of it.
No, not at all. Not at all. No, not at all. Yes, Yonason.
Rabbi Dalfin said that Shlomo HaMelech made Shir HaShirim because of love between the Chassid and the Kala.
Yes.
But had he known that there was a love between the Rebbe and the Chassid, he would have changed it.
He would have written Shir HaShirim not using the mushal of a man and a woman, but of a chassid and his Rebbe. That's the Chassidish of art. Yes.
So I can relate to that very well, because the two Chassidim that when they danced on the table, they felt that they had a reconnection to Hashem.
Yes.
Because the whole purpose of the Rebbe is to connect the Jewish people to Hashem, and without that, we don't have it.
Yes, 100%. 100%. There was.
It's a beautiful thing to have a connection to Hashem.
Yes, you said it well. Exactly. I mean, the situation was, a very bleak one. You talk about the situation today. Listen, today there's thousands and thousands of Lubavitchers all over, and shuls, and Chabad al-Zadash, and you know what I'm saying? But then there was a little decimated group, like every other group, the Chernobyl, everyone was decimated. There was nothing left, And Chabad had this rich 150, 200-year history of Rabbeim and writings and Chassidim. And here they are in Brooklyn, 10, 20, people. And then if I bring in 50 to 100 people, and some are living in Bensonhurst, and some are living in Brownsville, and some are living in Manhattan, and some are living in New Haven, and everyone's scattered. And the Frierdiker Rebbe was not well. He was an ill person. He came off the boat in 1940 in a wheelchair, and it was very hard for them and then 45, he has another stroke or whatever. It was a very difficult situation. So when this young man, the Rebbe was, right, he was born 1902, so in 1950 he was 48, 1951 he's 49, and he's a scholar, and Talmud Chochem, and he's frum, and he's a son-in-law, and he's a schneerson, and he's, young. Oh, they saw the future. And this is a very important lesson. I'm glad you brought up, Yonason, that you have to have a vision. And the vision is not just coming milmai lamata from the Rebbe to us, from the tzaddik to us, from the rabbi to us, from the Rosh Yeshiva to us. It's from us to them. In other words, over here, what happened here is, it was only because of Hasidim that the Rebbe finally agreed to take over the leadership. He didn't want this. Aselach Harav. Yeah. In fact, in 1951, around the same time, a Jew from a relative of ours named Tannenhaus, his son is a rabbi, a shliach in Hallandale, and so his father, Avram David, he was mamash, third, fourth cousin through the Dalfins to us. So he was friendly with the Rebbe in the 40s, and and he was a professor, mathematics professor, and he's very knowledgeable, and he learned also. Anyway, he came to the Rebbe and he said to him, "What do you need this headache for?" He knew Hasidim, he knew Lubavitchers, he lived with them, and like everyone else, there's issues. He says, why do you want to become a Rebbe for? And the Rebbe said, I don't want to become a Rebbe, but if it means that another Yid will be helped and grow, it's worth it, the headache. That's what he told him. His son told me this. His son repeats it. So Yonason, the reconnection, you're right. And now, this is 1951. So now it's 72 years later, whatever the case, it's ongoing. It's ongoing. The Rebbe passed away, Gimel Tammuz. Yeah, that's what Hashem wanted. But the flow and the continuation and the teachings and people going to the oil and writing letters, and I told you, lahavdil non-Jews and Jews, and it's from all sides. It's really, I'm telling you, it's to me, growing up in this culture, it's overwhelming. It's like, I wouldn't have not believed this, that now, 2023, it's exploded. And it's a bracha, and it's not just Yiddishkeit has exploded. Every community has grown, and I think Baruch Hashem that we came out stronger from the Holocaust than weaker, because we were almost finished, Chas v'Shalom, Nachman litzlan, and the Yiddish neshama pumped back and came back. And yes, it went through the hardships, the 50s and the 60s and the 70s and everything else. And the real tzaddikim, the big tzaddikim from the past passed away, and the Rosh Yeshiva and all that passed on. But you got to have a vision. And the vision is the young people. And the Rebbe saw it. At the end, he says, I'm not going to build Chabad with the old geezers. It ain't going to happen. They're great people, and they saw the Rashab, and they're very pious and religious. But we need soldiers to go out in the field and say, yeah, I don't have time now to learn Gemara and Chassidus. I have to put on film with a Yid or bring him kosher food. It's amazing to have this sisma, the sisma, this symbol of hafotza, yefutza b'nesecha chutza. And this was a vision that we Hasidim saw, and the Rebbe said, if you guys are ready to pull yourself together and work together, I'm in. Even though that's not, I'm an introvert and I want to learn in my corner, and I'm not, I have my wife and my sefer and my little shul and my work. He was working at the Brooklyn Navy Yard till 1945. No. You guys are in? So I think that this Yud Shvat idea demands of us to step up to the plate. That's the way I think we should think about it. Are we stepping up to the plate? Can we step up more to the plate? And then the Yiddishkeit will result in good results for kids, grandkids, and great-grandkids and our own families and friends, because they'll see that we didn't cop out when things got hot and heavy, right? When a big tzaddik passes away, or there's a murder, Rahman litzlan, 7 people coming out of shul in Neve Yaakov the other day. I mean, you could fall apart. Mamish fall apart. Where are you, God? What are you doing? They just haven't. They just davened and now they're killed. This murder, this Yamach Shemaynik, you know? And it's ongoing. You can fall apart. But we, as Yidden, we know we don't fall apart. We go further. We don't understand, but we know that the kavanah is up, not down. L'chaim, everyone. Have a great huge Shevat. Remember to write a pidyon nefesh. Write a note to the oil. Send it in through the fax or whatever. You can online. It doesn't cost anything. It takes a few minutes for you and your family. The names. Give some tzedakah to the institutions of the Rebbe and the Frierdiker Rebbe. Tell your family about things that I shared in the name of the Frierdiker Rebbe and the Rebbe. And light a candle. I wanted to tell you, if you have a yahrzeit candle, you should light a candle today. Still, you could do it still. And we should be zeicher to the Gula Shleima. L'chaim. L'chaim. I don't have right now, but I'm saying l'chaim u'levracha to everyone over here. We should only have simchas and brachas, begoli, with good health, and shidduchim, parnasa teva, and only emes avas Yisrael. We'll see each other very soon. Zay gesund. Shalom.